the Nguma. It was midsummer, and the dry heat of the Mambila Plateau was heavy. I, Kofi, had been wandering the local market in Port Harcourt, searching for a rare ivory carving, when I overheard a hushed conversation between two old guides. They spoke of a path, the Whispering Bush, a path they called the Road of Empty Shadows, and they whispered of a man who lived there, a hermit named Akafu, who only entertained guests on the night of the blood moon. I laughed it off as village nonsense, but the name Akafu and the phrase empty shadows stuck in my mind. Later that day, when circumstances forced me to travel that very path alone, I remembered their terror. I wished I could think the stories were fever or moon madness. But when I am alone after the sun falls in those forgotten stretches, and hear across infinite stillness the demon echoes of those screams, those guttural snarls, and that sickening crunching of bones, I am consumed again by the memory of that unholy night. It was midsummer, and the dry heat of the Mambila Plateau was heavy. I, Kofi, had been wandering the local market in Port Harcourt, searching for a rare ivory carving, when I overheard a hushed conversation between two old guides. They spoke of a path, the Whispering Bush, a path they called the Road of Empty Shadows, and they whispered of a man who lived there, a hermit named Akafu, who only entertained guests on the night of the blood moon. I laughed it off as village nonsense, but the name Akafu and the phrase empty shadows stuck in my mind. Later that day, when circumstances forced me to travel that very path alone, I remembered their terror. I wished I could think the stories were fever or moon madness. But when I am alone after the sun falls in those forgotten stretches, and hear across infinite stillness the demon echoes of those screams, those guttural snarls, and that sickening crunching of bones, I am consumed again by the memory of that unholy night. In those days, I was a novice to the deep bush, though the untamed wilderness of our land called to me with a power that grips me still. Until that night, I had never traveled without a seasoned tracker, but circumstance had suddenly thrown me upon my own survival skills. It was the sweltering heart of summer, and I desperately needed to travel from Port Harcourt to the remote village of Ngala by the following noon. Yet, I could find no soul willing to guide me. The direct path led through the legendary Whispering Bush, and everyone I asked met my request with a look of terror and a stammered refusal. They all offered the same flimsy excuses. Too much crucial business for a sleepy outpost. And I knew the locals were hiding a deeper fear. They insisted the trail was perfectly clear, running due north, assuring me that a strong young man could easily make Ngala by sundown and avoid a night in the open. I was too young and too stubborn to heed their superstition. I laughed off their tales of ancient spirits and beasts. So, before the sun climbed high, I set out, waterskin in hand, my robust service pistol secured in my pack, and a belt of crisp bills strapped to my waist. I calculated my speed and the distance, expecting to arrive just after sunset. But it was the African heat that betrayed my plans. As the sun rose higher, it burned through even the densest canopy, draining my strength with every stride. By midday, my clothes were drenched, and my resolve began to fail. Deeper in the Whispering Bush, the path became severely overgrown. It felt like months since a human had passed. Windshield hunger, I sought the deepest shade I could find, and devoured the simple food I had prepared: hard bread, dried meat, and a small flask of palm wine. The oppressive heat made the palm wine a fool's choice, and I slipped into a dead sleep. When my eyes snapped open, a deep, menacing twilight was settling around me. A sudden, cool wind across my cheeks brought me instantly to full awareness. The sky was gathering into a solid wall, a prelude to a torrential downpour. I decided to push on, hoping for any shelter before the storm broke. Just then, I saw it. A light. The soft glow of a window through the thicket. Desperate for cover, I rushed toward it. Oh, how I wish I had turned and fled. I found a small, rough clearing. On the far side, backed by the ancient forest, stood a dwelling. I hurried across the clearing and hammered loudly on the door. Positioning with startling speed, a deep, resonant voice answered with the single word, "Enter." I pushed open the unlocked door, stepping into a dim hall. As I closed the door, a pervasive odor struck me. Not just damp earth, but a faint, cloying smell. Like overripe fruit left to rot under a scorching sun, subtly mixed with something metallic, like dried blood. The man who had spoken sat in a vast armchair. He was strikingly handsome, with glossy black hair and large, expressive grey eyes that seemed unnaturally luminous. When he smiled a welcome, he revealed perfectly white, unnervingly even teeth. This was Akafu. "My apologies for the intrusion," I said, as the torrential deluge began. "You are welcome to the shelter I can offer," he replied. "I have a bad leg, so you must serve yourself." Relinquishing to an imposing height, he headed for the door with long, limping steps. I noticed that sometimes the limp seemed pronounced, almost an exaggeration, and other times he moved with a fluid grace that entirely contradicted his game leg. After I had prepared a small fire and a meager meal for myself, he declined, saying he had eaten earlier. I sat and smoked. He grew sullen and silent when he learned I was a stranger. I felt an undeniable quality of alienage radiating from him. The storm soon began to subside. I suggested I might resume my journey. "Best wait until morning," he remarked. "I have 2 bedrooms above, and you are welcome to one." After sitting without a word, I finally yawned. My host pointed to the stairs. "Take the lamp. Your room is the one on the right." Taking the lamp, I turned back to say goodnight. In the fading lamplight, I saw his eyes glowing with an unnatural greenish-yellow light in the gloom, like the eyes of a predator just beyond the reach of a campfire. As I climbed to the second floor, the room was bathed in the glorious silver light of the blood moon. Blowing out the lamp, I crossed to the window and threw it open, taking a deep breath of the cool air, which still carried that heavy, cloying odor. I rearranged the bedding to appear as if a body lay beneath the covers, dragged the room's single chair into the deep shadows, and sat down to watch. I had barely settled when my ears caught the distinct sound of footsteps ascending the stairs. They were loud and careless, not the soft, limping stride of my host. I retrieved my pistol, tiptoed across the room and crouched tensely behind the door. Enforcing, and into the shaft opened, and into the shaft of moonlight stepped a man I had never seen. He was the powerfully built Elder Kwesi. As I stared at him, I could have sworn I saw through his sturdy form. He noticed the disturbed bedclothes, muttered something in a forgotten Yoruba dialect, and began to undress. Flinging his clothes onto the chair, he slipped into the bed. Nim approached, reached out, and grasped for the sleeping man's shoulder. My clutching fingers passed directly through the sleeping form and seized only the sheet below. The man was intangible, spectral, yet I could still see him and hear his breathing. Then came the other footsteps. Soft, padded, canine, limping footsteps, pattering up, up, up. And the odor of stale blood hit me, this time in sickening, redoubled volume. Into that eerie moonlight stepped the gaunt, massive form of Nguma, an immense, shadowy hyena. It limped, for one hind leg was held awkwardly aloft. The eyes that glared towards me from that hellish skull were the same greenish-yellow phosphorescent eyes of my host, Akafu. The creature's eyes moved to the bed. It tilted its head back, and from its demon throat came the most shocking ululation I have ever heard. Then the bed stirred, opened its eyes, and shrank back. The beast crouched, and then, as the ethereal figure of Elder Kwesi let loose a shriek of mortal terror, it sprang straight for its victim's throat. Its white, bone-crushing teeth closed on the jugular of the screaming phantasm. I emptied my pistol into the monstrous creature, but all I heard was the unhindered thud of each bullet as it embedded itself harmlessly in the opposite wall. Blind panic hurled me toward the door. I saw the Nguma sink its teeth into the body of its quarry. This was the same body I had thrust my hand through moments before. And yet, as I plunged down that black nightmare staircase, I could hear the horrific, undeniable crunching of bones. I do not know how I found the trail or how I managed to traverse it. I only know that sunrise found me on a ridge overlooking Ngala. At the first inn, the proprietor eyed me suspiciously. "You came through the Devil's Bush. Through the Devil's Bush last night. Alone." The old man stared, a queer mix of horror and disbelief on his face. He then told the legend. Years ago, Akafu settled here. They said he was a servant of something ancient, an Nguma or skin-eater, a shapeshifter. One night a hunter shot the beast, and the next time Akafu came to the village he walked with a limp. Then, he summoned the revered Elder Kwesi. It was the night of the blood moon. The elder only told his guards to follow him to Akafu's place if he didn't return. They found the elder's mangled body, young man, and a giant black hyena hovering over it. They killed it, buried it deep beneath the house, and then burned the entire structure down. All this happened 60 years ago.
I turned away with a shudder. It was all quaint and distant in the glaring light of day.
But sometimes, when I am alone in the waste places, and the infinite void carries the demon echoes of those screams and snarls, and that detestable crunching of bones, I shudder again at the memory of that eldritch night. And I still check my hand in the moonlight, just to be sure that I, too, am not an empty shadow.